Welcome to the Disney Wedding Podcast. This show is brought to you by Carrie Hayward's Fairy Tale Weddings Guide, the only guidebook and bridal organizer tailored exclusively to Disney's fairy tale weddings at Walt Disney World. I'm Carrie Hayward, and each week I feature Disney wedding updates, money-saving tips, and interviews with wedding vendors and real Disney couples. I also cover honeymoons, anniversaries, and engagements at the Disney parks and resorts. Join me now as the Disney Wedding Podcast celebrates romance at Disney destinations. Today on the Disney Wedding Podcast, I'm speaking with Disney bride Abby Trawick about her ceremony at the Wedding Pavilion with a reception at Atlantic Dance Hall on the boardwalk. I thought you guys would be interested to hear how she chose these locations and how she planned everything and how it all turned out. So welcome, Abby.
Hi, so happy to be here.
Thanks for being on the show today. I would love to start at the very beginning and find out how you and your fiancé decided that you wanted to have your wedding at Disney.
So we had looked at a couple of venues. We live in Jacksonville, Florida, which is about a 2-hour drive from Orlando. So we looked at a couple of venues here in Jacksonville, but we ended up going with Disney first for the ease of just having all the vendors in one spot and not having to deal with most of them. And we had family traveling from Massachusetts, so it made it so kind of everybody had a little bit of a journey. So yeah, we just decided that was easier.
How did your friends and family react when they found out where the wedding was going to be?
My family, I think it was expected. I'm a big Disney fan. I think for his side, it was a little bit more shocking as he doesn't like Disney as much as I did, but they were all very supportive and very excited about what it was going to be like.
That's wonderful. How many guests did you invite and how many were able to make the trip?
We invited 48 guests and 34 were able to make the trip.
Oh, that's great. Did you set up a room block for your guests?
We did not. I had just heard from a lot of other Disney brides that was like one of their number one stressors. And I feel like given that a wedding has a lot of stressors already, I didn't need to add that onto it. And we had a lot of people kind of coming and we didn't know if they were going to stay for one night or 2 nights, or because we had it in the middle of the week, we weren't really sure how long people were planning on staying. So we didn't want to kind of have that weight on them where we're asking them constantly like, hey, have you decided where or how long you're going to stay so we can figure this out? So it was just easier being like, wherever you want to stay, wherever's in your budget, as long as you're there, it doesn't matter.
That's great. Now, how did you choose the day of the week and time of day for your event?
For us, it was all decided on budget, especially because Disney recently increased their prices. So we decided based off of prices, and we knew we wanted to have it at Disney at that point. So once you kind of look at everything and you're like, we're getting the same thing, just a little bit cheaper if we do it on this day, and the people who can make it. And if they can't, it's okay. We knew having it in the middle of the week was going to complicate it for some people, but for our budget, it was just the best choice.
That's great. And how did you choose time of day?
I had a really hard time choosing the time of day because I loved the idea of having a brunch because I love breakfast food. But the idea of having dancing in like the daylight with daylight pouring in, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I felt like people weren't going to be totally into the dancing if it wasn't at night. So that kind of sealed it for us where we were like, we need it in the evening time where it's going to be dark, and the people who maybe aren't dancers might be more willing to dance because of the time of day that it is.
Did it work out?
Yes, luckily it did. We had a lot of people who were in our category of we're not really sure if they're even going to step foot on the dance floor. But given, I think that they had been a little stressed out during the day with the ceremony and everything, getting them into the reception and stuff and letting them loose, it was definitely the better choice to have it at night. I think in the morning we would have not had many people on the dance floor.
Got it. Okay. Now, how did you choose your ceremony and reception venues?
The ceremony one was easy. We looked at a couple of them, but we knew that given the Florida weather, I mean, we live down here, so we know how unpredictable it is. We knew that both of them had to be inside because we didn't want to deal with the what ifs or calling it on the morning of. And so we knew they had to be inside, and looking at all the inside venues that Disney has to offer, the Wedding Pavilion was just an easy choice. First, because it didn't require any decor, and it was just nicely located because we stayed at the Grand Floridian, so it was a good location for us. And then the reception one was, in my opinion, was I think a really hard one to choose because I know a lot of people who do the Wedding Pavilion always end up in a ballroom. But for me, it was like I could have done a ballroom anywhere in the world and nobody would really know it was a Disney ballroom or it was at Disney. So I wanted to make sure that the location of the reception venue was somewhere that it was going to be hard to get somewhere else. So it felt more exclusive. So we looked at a couple of venues, but we ended up with Atlantic Dance Hall. I liked the idea that we kind of had the whole space to ourselves. And I think going from the Grand Floridian and that kind of vibe all the way to the boardwalk, I think gave people who maybe don't go to Disney a lot and don't really know how much is out there other than the parks a good glimpse of like, wow, I had no idea that this was even here or that it was possible to go to Disney and not be in the parks. So our guests ended up loving the Atlantic Dance Hall, and it was perfect for the amount of people that we had.
That's a great idea. Did you guys use any outside vendors for the portions of your event that you were able to?
Yes, so we used Greenery Productions for my bouquet, my mom's bouquet, the groom's mother's bouquet, and then the boutonnieres. We used the Roots for photography, and then Lejeune makeup for our hair and makeup for the day of.
Got it. How did you guys choose your officiant?
Our officiant is actually our close family friend. So my husband, his neighbor, was actually the one who officiated our wedding, and this was his fourth or fifth wedding, so he was still a little nervous. But I loved the touch that it felt like he really put in a lot of effort as far as the fact that he knew us and he knew our relationship, and it felt a little more personal than grabbing somebody that maybe we weren't so familiar with.
Got it. Okay. Did you add any kind of entertainment to the ceremony or the reception?
We had a DJ at the reception. We had DJ Greg, and at the ceremony, I wasn't fully aware of exactly what happened, and I wasn't explained to after, but of course when I was walking down the aisle and everything was kind of tunnel vision. But as I was looking at the pictures after, I realized that we not only had an organist, but we also had a violinist, but we didn't ask for a violinist or pay for a violinist, so I'm not sure what happened, but there was one there.
That's great.
Yeah, extra bonus, right?
Do you have any menu items or cake flavors from your reception that you would recommend?
Yes. So we also had a dessert party the night before at UK Lochside. So we did cheeseburger spring rolls, which I know is always a big thing, but the big hit of that night was the bacon wrapped scallops. Like, people were going crazy over them. They were smaller than like a regular scallop, but they had so many up there and people were taking 6, 7, 8 at a time. So those were a huge hit that night. And then for our reception, of course, the braised short rib, which I heard from our catering lead at our reception. He said they no longer offer it at the tastings anymore, which is so weird because we had it at our tasting, but I guess he said they don't offer it anymore at tastings. So if you don't get to taste it, it's definitely, that was a hit. Surprisingly, the regular like garlic mashed potatoes, people were like fawning over that. And the strawberry soup, I know most people, they go for either two salads or they'll go for the soup that's the Le Cellier soup. But I will say the strawberry soup was, I think it was so different that like everybody seemed to grab one thinking, I have to try this because where else am I going to have this? And a lot of people surprisingly loved it. So I would definitely recommend that. And then for the cake, the lavender and the churro ones were the ones that we loved, and we ended up choosing for two of our tiers. And those were the ones that were served. And we only had 34 people and we had two tiers and they had nothing left over at the end of the night. So it seemed like it was a big hit because when I asked our lead if they could pack up the rest, he was like, we don't have any. It's like, oh, okay. Because I thought they told us the cake was going to serve 80. So either multiple people went up for a lot more cake than it seemed like, or they cut the pieces bigger. I'm not sure, but both of those were a big hit.
Can you tell my listeners a little bit more about your welcome party at UK Lochside?
Yes. So we had it after our rehearsal. Our rehearsal was at 4:30 in the Wedding Pavilion. So it ended at 5:30. And following that, we took the monorail from the Grand Floridian to EPCOT. We met somebody at the front and they walked us back. And they obviously had everything all set up for us already. So they had the coffee, the tea, the water, the lemonade, all that kind of stuff. And then we had cheeseburger, spring rolls, bacon wrapped scallops, and then we had the Mickey like waffle whoopie pies, which were amazing. And I would say like for our group size, we had 25 people. It was plenty of food for sure. We had people go up for multiple times, but other than that, it was plenty of food. And then we had Nate from the Roots come to take firework pictures of us, which was amazing. And it was definitely good time for photos. Other than that, I think the only other tip I would have, if your venue, which most of them are for the dessert parties, are by the water, there were a lot of bugs. So they don't supply any bug spray or anything like that. So I would say if you have people that are either allergic to that stuff or get really sensitive, just tell them to bring some bug spray because they were all over us that night.
Wow, that's crazy. What season was this?
It was April 2nd. So not really rainy season, but it was like warm, but not hot. So they were like just starting to come out.
Huh.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it was because we were like right on the water, which I know most of those dessert party venues are right on the water, but it was kind of as the sun's setting, you realize more and more are kind of coming towards you. So I would definitely recommend bringing something because there were a lot. And when you have somebody there taking pictures and you don't want them pictures of you swatting flies away. So.
Okay, that's a good tip. Did you add a ride mix in for your guests?
No, which I'm glad we didn't. I know a lot of people do, but we're glad we didn't because by the time that the guides that we had were like, okay, we're going to start walking, our party was beat. They were ready to go back and get rest before the next day. All the groomsmen, these younger dudes are like, we need to go. Like, we're so tired. So I'm glad we did it because they were ready to go for sure.
Can you give my listeners a timeline of how the wedding day ran?
Yes. So me and my mom, who stayed together, we woke up at around 6:30 to steam my dress because hair and makeup told us very strictly that there was no steaming once they stepped in the room. So we made sure to do that ahead of time. And my bridesmaids arrived at about 7:45. And then hair and makeup arrived at 8:30. And there were myself, two moms, and then five bridesmaids. And they brought one lady for hair and one lady for makeup. And they were amazing. they told us like, hey, we're going to have you ready by like 1:30. 12:30 came around and they were like already packed up going out the door. So they were definitely much quicker than they let off, which was amazing because we were able to take some photos around the room and kind of just relax before the photographers arrived. So 1:30 is when Nate and Jency arrived at our room, and they did bridesmaids pictures first, and then he took pictures with the dress. And it was a little chaotic kind of because he's trying to do stuff, and then the bridesmaids are all trying to get dressed and the moms are trying to get dressed, but it was good chaos. And then around 2 p.m., he had me get in my dress, took pictures in the room. And then we had the groomsmen. We were in the Grand Floridian, like one of the villas buildings. So we had all the groomsmen kind of meet in the lobby of the building because we weren't really sure what Nate and Jency wanted to do with them. So they gathered like the bridesmaids and the groomsmen and sent them to the main lobby with the parents and all that kind of stuff. And then Ethan and I got set up for our first look. So Nate took Ethan outside, kind of towards where the like Grand Floridian beach is. They set him up there, and then I kept my maid of honor and my matron of honor with me because my dress was quite heavy. And then come to realize it was probably for the best because once we got outside, the wind was blowing. So I'm glad that I had them because I probably would have lost an item or two. So they followed me out there, set me up and all that kind of stuff. And we did our first look. And then during our first look, we also did like some private vows. So that took about like 10 to 15 minutes. And then Nate did some pictures after that of just us two outside. And then the wind started whipping up a little heavier and he kind of shooed us inside. And it was perfect timing because from about 3 o'clock to maybe 11:30 p.m., it poured. So it was for the best that we went inside. And then we went inside around, like I said, 3 o'clock, which is when everybody was supposed to be there for like family photos and those formal type of photos. So we took those on like the side of the staircase, the main staircase of the Grand Floridian, took some pictures on the staircase, and then we went outside, like under the covering, like as close as you could get to like where the rain was falling, but not being in it. And he took some amazing photos, him and Jency, like with umbrellas, and we weren't actually in the rain, but the photos turned out great. And of course, as a bride who goes and takes pictures at the Grand Floridian, it is a little disappointing when you can't go on the grass in front of the building and take the pictures in the beautiful sun, but the photos came out amazing nonetheless. So definitely aware of that when you choose your photographer, that not only can they take pictures in the sun, but they can take them in bad weather as well. And then at around 4:30, we had a bus take us from the like main lobby of the Grand Floridian to the Wedding Pavilion. So we had two trips. The first trip was like parents and like grandmothers and all that kind of stuff. And then they came back and got the wedding party for the second one. So that was probably around 4:40, 4:45. Took us over to the Wedding Pavilion, and we were immediately, me and the girls were put into the bridal suite room that they have. So that was that. And then they came to get me at like 4:55, and they kind of lined everybody up, and they kept me and my dad in the room to kind of keep us out of everybody's sight. And then once everybody walked down the aisle, they collected us and walked us out. And then the ceremony, of course, you know how Disney has started promptly at 5 p.m. The ceremony went fast for me. I would say it was probably 15, maybe 20 minutes. Pretty quick. And then me and Ethan walked back down the aisle, and they put us immediately in the bridal suite, which I was so happy about because we were able just to kind of sit there for like 5 minutes and kind of be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we just got married. while everybody else took care of everything else. So I'm glad that I didn't stand there because I think I would have tried to like micromanage everybody if I was sitting there. So I'm glad they put me away from everything else. But while we were in there, they were setting up. We had these little like streamers we bought off of Amazon that had like little bells at the end for like a exit. But of course it was raining, so they couldn't do it on the bridge. So they set it up in the aisle of the wedding pavilion, which worked out perfect. They did one like from the door to the altar and then one from the altar to the door. So it gave them two different chances to get good shots. So we did that. And then the planner, who was Macy, she was amazing. She sent everybody to be like, hey, you can start heading towards the Atlantic Dance Hall. And then my like wedding party stayed with us so we could take the bus to the Atlantic Dance Hall. So we stayed and took a couple more pictures in the wedding pavilion after the exit. And then I changed my shoes, took my veil off, all that kind of stuff. And then we got in the bus on the way there about like 6:15. They took us straight to the boardwalk lobby where this wonderful woman was waiting there with ponchos. I don't know where she came from. She was just like, who needs a poncho? And she was handing them out like Oprah does with cars. She was like, who wants one? Who wants one? And when I tell you, I've never seen like my bridesmaids, the groomsmen, like more relieved, because that whole day, you can see by some of the pictures, there's 4, 5, 6 umbrellas over me. And of course, like me and my dress are the priority. So some of them are getting like half rained on. And so I think they were very grateful that we had the ponchos. So they kind of saved them, because if you don't know, it's a bit of a walk from the boardwalk lobby to the Atlantic Dance Hall, and none of it's covered. So I was very, very grateful she was there to hand out ponchos. So at that point, we used the time in the lobby really quick. It was about 6:25. We used that time to bustle my dress so I wouldn't drag it through the rain. I'm not sure if I'm the only one who didn't know this, that the bustles on the dresses are just, at least on mine, were glued on with like fabric glue. And so 2 of them actually ripped while we were trying to tie them. So luckily, our planner, wonderful Macy, had safety pins on her. And so we were able to kind of just pin where we thought it should go or where it was supposed to go, and kind of just say, you know what, this is as good as it's going to get. But just make sure, I mean, we tried it at the bridal salon and it still happened that day. So I'm not sure what you can do to prevent that, but just a heads up, because it did delay us a couple minutes trying to figure that out. And then we walked to the dance hall. We got to the dance hall about 6:30, which is when it was supposed to start anyway. So they had let everybody in already to get drinks from the bar, do whatever they needed to do. And that's when we met. They were 2 coordinators from the Disney wedding team, and they had told me and Ethan that there was a mix-up, and the chairs that we had ordered were actually ordered for the next day and not today. So they didn't show up. So they had to use the regular chairs, which of course in the grand scheme of things is not a huge deal. But when you're going for an aesthetic and then you have the carpety banquet chairs, doesn't really go. But luckily, out of everything, of course, nobody noticed that those weren't supposed to be the chairs that were supposed to be there. But of course, they apologized and told us we would get refunded and everything. But at that point, it was nothing you could do. So after that, around 6:45, they did our entrances. So we just did his parents, my parents, and then us. And then we went right into our first dance after the entrances. And then after the first dance, this is a little out of like tradition, but I would highly recommend it to anybody who's considering it. We played 2 like really popular songs with like all the generations. So we played like September and then an Elvis song, like right after our first dance, and kind of invited everybody to just come and dance. And I feel like it really kind of set the vibes for the rest of the night. We had almost everybody on the floor for those two songs, which was great. And I think it was perfect for Nate and Jency to get pictures because everybody was on the floor and they were just, the people who were stressed out were no longer stressed out. And then everybody was just having a good time. And then after that, we sat for a couple speeches and then we went into dinner. Following dinner, we had one last speech and then we did the mother-son and then the father-daughter. And then around 8:15, they opened up the dance floor for everybody. And then around 9:15, they pulled us over to do our cake cutting. And then in case you're like us, we had 3 tiers. We had a chocolate tier at the top and then churro and then lavender at the bottom. And my husband really wanted the piece of chocolate, but we didn't want to serve the rest of the chocolate tier. So what we did was we asked the captain of the catering if we could cut the top tier. And he told us he had never seen it done before. He's like, I will stand by you and we'll kind of watch. And if I see it kind of like sinking, I'll tell you to stop and we'll just cut a different part. But luckily, everything worked out. We were able to cut the top tier and we just cut one piece off and we were able to have just that piece because he wanted a piece of the chocolate. And then we took the rest and then the rest was served. So if that's something where you're like, we really just want us to have this one flavor of cake, it worked for us. So I would go right ahead and try it. And then after that, they opened the dancing up again. And then Nate and Jency took us outside Atlantic Dance Hall and we took pictures outside, because it was timed with the fireworks and everything like that. So we took some pictures outside of Atlantic Dance Hall and then went back inside, did some more dancing and all that kind of stuff. And then around 11:30, pushed everybody out. And then we had our kind of like last dance, just the two of us. And then we walked back to the boardwalk lobby to leave from there. So long day, but good day.
Now, when you were planning, what were some of the most important aspects where you focused your attention or your budget?
For us, one was, of course, the food. We wanted to make sure not only that everybody was going to eat something from there, but that most of it was going to be eaten. Of course, if you're spending that much on food for one night, you want to make sure that it's good food and that everybody's going to eat it. Our second thing was probably just like experience. We went back and forth a couple times about the dessert party the night before and if it was really worth the money and if we wanted to do it. And I'm so glad we did because not only was everybody able to get like more comfortable with each other prior to the wedding day, but the pictures that we were able to take and the time we were able to spend with our family, like you're not going to get that time back. So I'm glad we spent the money to do that. So that was important. The next thing, probably the last thing was probably just like the aesthetic of everything. We went for a black and white theme. So we wanted to make sure that it was simple and classic and was not going to go out of style. So it was important that when we did our first meeting with Disney up until the very last BEO went through, that everything was what we said it was going to be. The tablecloths, of course, the chairs went wrong. But other than that, the flowers, everything like that was like we pulled pictures, we pulled everything to make sure that it was exactly what we wanted it to be. And Nate and Jency said they had been into Atlantic Dance Hall numerous times to shoot weddings, and they said they had never seen it look so dressed up. So that was perfect because that's exactly what we were trying to do.
Were there any aspects that were less important where you saved your money or just your effort?
The decor in the wedding pavilion, we didn't do anything in there. We didn't feel like it needed it, and we were able to save money for that. The bridesmaids bouquets, we made those the night before the wedding with flowers that we ordered from Orlando Flower Market. We got a huge box of hydrangeas and baby's breath, and we just put them into bouquets and ordered a little thing on Amazon with like floral tape and floral cutters. So altogether, it maybe cost us like $150 for all 5 of their bouquets, and we had plenty of flowers left over, which ended up being good because we almost had to make my bouquet with them. uh, of course, I said earlier that like we only chose 3 things for the dessert party, which it's always tempting to add more because all their options are amazing. But when you think of how many people are going to be there, and a lot of them, they like one or the other thing that you chose, and they just eat a few of those. And after usually the rehearsal and everything like that, nobody really wants to feel too full. So I would say we saved money by kind of cutting down on the dessert party menu as well.
That's a great tip. Out of all of this, what ended up being your favorite memory of your wedding day?
I think our favorite memory was when Nate and Jency took us outside, because when it started pouring, you always think, okay, like our photos are inside. That's just the card we've been dealt. And when he was like, no, I'm going to check a couple spots outside and we'll see what we can do. He ended up taking us outside, and we got these pictures with these 2 umbrellas that they had brought out, and then a couple without the umbrellas. And it was just us, and then my maid of honor, my matron of honor, and then them, of course. But it just felt like so intimate that it was just us. And of course, because it was raining, there was nobody outside watching or anything like that. And when we were in the lobby, there was people floors above us, like hanging over the railing watching us. So that, of course, is like a little nerve-wracking. So when we went outside and there was nobody out there, and we were just taking pictures, and it almost felt like a moment to like take that deep breath and be like, okay, like one thing at a time. And yeah, it was amazing. And those were definitely the ones where the morning after we were like, we can't wait to see those photos. Like we just knew they turned out so beautiful.
That's awesome. Now, did anything go wrong or not turn out like you expected? You mentioned the chairs.
Yes. So the chairs, of course, like that was just it was an error on the floral and decors part, where they had ordered them for April 4th, not April 3rd. So of course they never showed up. Aside from that, which we got refunded on that, and our floral person, her name was Sydney, she kindly sent us a gift a day or so after that at our hotel room with a couple of engraved champagne flutes and some chocolates, and just like an apology note that it was an oversight on their fault and they felt really bad. So that was kind of her to send that. And then the second thing that went wrong was the bouquet. As I said before, it was Greenery Productions, which the flowers were absolutely gorgeous. They were beautiful, and they lasted way too long, given that most of my bouquet was roses. I don't know how they did that, but they were supposed to deliver them at around 12:30. And they had 2 of our like numbers. So they had my mom's number and then my maid of honor's number. And we went 10 minutes and hadn't done anything. So my mom's like, hey, I'm going to give them a call and just see like where they're at. And they didn't pick up. And we were like, oh, okay. And then 15 minutes go by and we're like, okay, like, and so we keep trying to call them and they're not answering, and we're calling the office number, and we're calling the lady that I was corresponding with, her number, and nobody's picking up. So gratefully, my amazing bridesmaids went right into action mode, and they were taking the extra flowers we had, and they were like, we're just going to make you one because we'd rather you have a bouquet than not have one. So they started trying to make me one with the flowers that we had. And then around 30 minutes after they were supposed to deliver them, they called my phone, which, I mean, we had it there, but of course shouldn't have called me. But we picked up and they said they were pulling into the front lobby and everything like that. So aside from them like being late, and of course like hair and makeup was done by then, so we're just sitting there talking, waiting for the flowers, and so obviously time passes by much slower at that point. Um, so we got a little worried that they weren't going to show up, but they did come through, and the flowers were beautiful. But it was a little hectic there for a second. And then other than that, I mean, of course, the weather wasn't exactly what we pictured, but with the day that we had, I don't think I would have changed, like gone back and changed the weather. I think it was, it worked out for the best.
That's wonderful. Was there anything that seemed like a big deal beforehand or you were worried about and then it turned out not to be a big deal?
I was a big stickler about the dance floor and the music and the DJ. And I don't know if I would put this in the category of like didn't go right, but I would be very specific about your DJ. I don't know. I heard so many mixed reviews about DJs and they like this person, but they didn't like this person. Of course, it's personal taste and it's really, really difficult, especially in the span where you're getting your DJ from Disney or you have to get them from Disney, where you are talking to them. They reach out 30 days out, but we did not speak to our DJ like on the phone till 3 days before the wedding. So of course it's hard to gauge exactly what kind of DJ they're going to be 3 days out for the wedding. But I had given him a like fully made playlist and I was like, this is the playlist I want played. And he was like, okay, like what songs do you want to hear? And I was like, all of them. Like I made this playlist. I would like to hear all the songs on them. And he was like, okay, perfect. I can do that. And I also gave him like a do not playlist, but he didn't do what I had asked. He didn't play most of the songs on the playlist and he played songs that I had asked not to be played. So I think that's some of the problem with the Disney DJs because you're only speaking to them 3 days out. I was very worried about the dance floor. And aside from the fact that he didn't play exactly the songs I had picked out, the bridesmaids, the friends, the family, they were all on the dance floor anyways. So I think for those people who are like me that you always see weddings online, you're like, wow, everybody's on the dance floor. We had 34 people and the dance floor felt full, which was good because that was definitely something I was worried about. I was like, it's just going to be me and Ethan and like my parents and that's it. But it ended up being more people, which was good. So that I thought was going to be a big deal before. And then of course every bride thinks about the weather and I would just say as long as your venues are not outside, don't worry about it because your photographers, your planners, your coordinators, they're on your team. They're there to make sure no matter what you're getting there, you're dry, you're all that kind of stuff, and they will do anything to achieve that.
Is there anything you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
I would probably pick a different DJ, but aside from that, I don't think I would do anything differently.
That's great. Do you have any other tips or advice for future Disney couples?
I know a lot of people give this advice, but do what you want to do. You're going to have a million other opinions. I mean, we had only invited about 48 people. And when they mean like around 10 to 20% won't come, believe them. 10 to 20% of the people you invited will not come. And I thought for sure that didn't apply to me because all we invited was close friends and family. And I was like, no way, these people are going to say no. Like either I grew up with them or we hang out with them all the time and like, no way they're going to say no. But that rule it's a hard rule because there will be 10 to 20% of that list that will say no. And that was hard to kind of comprehend given how small we were already. I would say if you're not huge on having a huge wedding, don't. Me and Ethan did not circulate around the tables. We did not greet anybody because we had either already talked to everybody there or they had come up to us on the dance floor or when we were walking or when we were doing this. And that's what I think is such a perk to having a smaller wedding, is that you don't have to take time out of your day to speak to other people because they always find you or you bump into each other or all that kind of stuff. And I would say my last piece of advice is really, really invest in your photographers. Whoever you decide, of course, I recommend the Roots because they are God tier level of photography, but definitely invest in them. Look at their portfolios, speak to people, ask for other brides' photos, say, I heard you used whoever. Can I see some photos? Because you cannot get that day back. You cannot get those pictures redone. And when I tell you, I showed my family, my bridesmaids, their groomsmen, and there was not one person who was like, oh, this picture's not it, or this didn't turn out so well. It was every picture you're swiping on is like, oh my goodness, and look at this one, and oh my goodness, and how did he get that? And look at this one, and he captured the relationships between the bridesmaids and me and the groomsmen and our family, and even between Ethan and I, where we're just looking at each other, and he just captures those feelings so beautifully. Yeah, between that and I would always recommend having it doesn't have to be an engagement shoot, but either a meet and greet or some kind of photo shoot with your photographer before, because we felt like we were best friends with Nate going into our wedding day. Like he came over like, hey, like it's so nice to see you again. And like having that relationship already built where you know how they take photos and how they ask you to do things and all that kind of stuff already takes a lot of stress out of that day where you're like, well, I don't want to be awkward and I don't want to have bad photos. It takes that away where you know exactly what you're expecting with that photographer come that day.
Got it. Well, Abby, I think you've offered a lot of great tips and advice for anyone who's interested in getting married or having a vow renewal at Walt Disney World, and I appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Carrie Hayward, inviting you to join me again next week for another episode of the Disney Wedding Podcast. Past shows and tons of photos for each episode are available on my website, DisneyWeddingPodcast.com, or listen in your favorite podcast app. And for instant answers to all your Walt Disney World wedding questions, check out Carrie Hayward's Fairy Tale Weddings Guide, available as an interactive ebook with continual free updates at fairytaleweddingsguide.com.